It's Wednesday, the 9th of November, 2016, or the 1st of January, the year one in Trump years. I am Robin Yellow, and this is Techtasm episode 36, Donald Trump's in the face of science and technology. And with me again, because no one else can come up with such great show titles as me, is James Woodall.
I have to say credit this week to your show title. Very, very good.
It's a peculiarly British show title, isn't it?
It is. I wonder if our American audience member will get it.
Unlikely. Well, James, this week we're going to be taking a look at the new US president's threat to net neutrality and science-based policy. Sony dumps a new PlayStation on us, and Google finally solve Android's fragmentation problem. And we'll be judging these stories and another story as well to tell you if they are a Techtasm, which is a blend of tech for technology and tasm for phantasm, something existing only in a person's mind. So without further babble, let's get on with the show.
So David Kravitz reports in Ars Technica about President-elect Donald Trump and how he might affect science and technology over the coming 4 years, or God forbid, 8 years.
You've shown your hand a little bit too early there, James.
Yeah, well, it's hard. It's actually really interesting. There's a consistent theme throughout this story in my favorite website, in that almost every policy starts off with the Trump campaign has been a little bit light on information regarding this. So I guess if they're not talking about building a wall in Mexico, they don't really have a lot of information. So yeah. Well, okay. Well, let's just go down the list. So this article is basically from David, and he's talking about how Donald Trump and his presidency is going to affect potentially science and technology over the coming years. And let's just start with broadband and net neutrality, which I know is a big deal for you.
And just for our listeners who don't know what net neutrality is.
Oh, I thought you were going to explain that then. But okay.
I was teeing you up.
Oh, thanks very much. I thought I'd get a sneaky drink of my can of Coke here. Other drinks are available. Okay, net neutrality, I guess, is the concept that everybody should have free and unhindered access to all of the internet without your service provider from getting in the way.
Or providing subsidies to certain portions of the internet to give unfair advantage to some websites.
Yeah, so I guess the overarching point from Ars Technica is that the one thing Donald Trump has spoken about is a temporary moratorium on new agency regulations. Basically, being a Republican, he hates regulation, big government, and all that kind of stuff. So I guess what he's saying is he doesn't want the government really getting involved in things, which I guess, I don't know if that's good or bad. I mean, I suppose you'll be letting the ISPs kind of running around and doing what they want.
Well, okay, so he's anti-regulation. I get that. In what way so the internet requires some regulation, doesn't it, in terms of DNS naming, conventions, ICANN, effectively providing the top level address for the internet. And, regulation could potentially prevent things like net neutrality issues by holding to account ISPs that, for example, give favored access to Netflix, which will perhaps prevent other online video services from flourishing. So in some ways, or in a lot of ways, I think regulation is very helpful to the goals and aims of the internet, and removing regulation or reducing the amount of legislation could potentially have an adverse effect.
Yeah, and look, it's really weak and it's very thin on the ground in terms of actual information.
Well, you could argue, can I take that a little bit further, James, and say that actually I think it's more than that. I think that Donald Trump's campaign, or when he was in with the other Republican nominees, he was saying one thing, and then when he became the GOP candidate, he said a load of other things, and presumably as president, he's going to say a whole load of other things as well. So this refers not only to the Mexican wall that you referred to earlier, but certainly some of these policies as well. He's going to be guided by his advisors on the right thing to do. And of course, that's going to be coloured and tainted by his own personal preferences, which, as you say, may be to reduce regulation rather than improve it. Because, of course, he comes from the point of view of believing that the market will decide, and whatever the market decides is best, which, as sensitive lefty Europeans, we don't wholeheartedly subscribe to the same philosophy.
The thing with Donald Trump, though, is he gives the people what they want to hear. So I was talking to somebody earlier today who was basically saying that whatever happens over the next 4 years will be basically about who shouts loudest. So a lot of his policies may not, in fact, get implemented, because I don't quite see how he could. So I don't actually know how we can possibly predict what Donald Trump is going to do, because I don't think he himself knows. I think he's waiting for somebody to tell him what to do.
Yeah, fair enough. In which case we may be okay.
Yes. So the next point, encryption and cybersecurity. Now, Donald Trump was very quiet and brushed off when the intelligence community, in fact, the entire intelligence community, pointed the finger at Russia and said that they attacked Hillary Clinton and the Democratic National Committee. So it's interesting when it comes to cybersecurity. I mean, of course, like with the previous one, Oz says, like most of his other policies, Trump's cybersecurity plan remains thin. However, his policies have called for, and I quote, an immediate review of all U.S. cyber defenses and vulnerabilities, including critical infrastructure, by a cyber review team of individuals from the military, law enforcement, and the private sector.
Oh, a review? What on earth does that mean?
Probably just drawing penises on a piece of paper, I suspect.
He's going to review it and make encryption great again. Yes, yeah, exactly. Because when was it not great? Yeah, well, it's all jingoistic, tub-thumping nonsense, really, isn't it? I mean, a review is just a code for I'm going to look like I'm doing something, but may end up doing nothing. I think that, US cyber defenses and vulnerabilities are something that's under constant review, and they've got a lot of the world's smartest people worrying about it day in and day out, and I'm not sure what effect he'll actually have on this. Next.
Well, if I could just quit, I'm not quite ready to finish this one, which is, hold your horses. He did, in fact, call for a boycott of Apple, if you remember, when they refused to help out the FBI.
That's true.
Although, ironically, all of those tweets came from an iPhone. So,
yeah, but you don't have to be poor just to be a socialist, do you? I mean, the message is still the same. If you think that his natural reaction is to have a go at Apple when they don't fully comply with the federal government.
It's Donald Trump versus the world, right? And that's what people like about him. So he's standing up. It doesn't matter that he probably completely forgot about everything he spoke about because he was just saying it for
but I think the one thing that he's proved in this entire campaign is that you can say whatever you like as long as he gets a round of applause.
Yep, very true. And clearly that's what it takes to win an election. So,
the question is, how much is that going to change when he becomes president in January?
Okay. Well, let's wait and see. Okay, moving on. Science. Let's be vague here. Basically, ours starts off by saying, by some accounts, Donald Trump is likely to be a disaster for science. And effectively, they come to that conclusion because he has indicated very little respect for science, and has also openly talked about stupid things like the fact that he's debunked the suggestion that vaccines can induce autism. So,
oh no, is he? Oh God.
Yeah. He also, of course, made fun of the whole global warming, saying that China invented global warming, so we'll buy more stuff. Yeah. So I think that
Americans per capita consume twice as many hydrocarbons as any other nation on Earth.
I can believe that. Well, I mean, they're still they're still bringing on like coal power plants and and things like that, which is just...
Yeah, certainly it's easy to point the finger at China, and you have this sort of distorted view that they're producing lots and lots of coal stations. China are a world leader in nuclear energy, a world leader in wind turbines, and they are producing more renewable energy than anybody else. They're just doing a lot of stuff, and they're using the most modern information that they have to do the stuff with. And I think it's easy to point the finger, especially, as you say, if you want to be jingoistic about it and blame China for everything. In terms of the impact on science, the real question will come when, the Appropriations Committee for Science has to award grants, because invariably that's how science is funded, through government schemes and grants. What's interesting is that, the parallel with Brexit is that, I was at a conference on quantum technology last week, or was it this week? No, it was last week. And they were saying that one of the speakers gave a story that they had a very talented Italian scientist that applied for a job at this august scientific institution to do research into quantum technology, and then after the Brexit vote decided not to take the job because he didn't feel welcome anymore. And the question, of course, is to what extent will this sort of isolationist policy and kind of front, if nothing else, deter the world's most talented individuals from A, working in America, and B, from Appropriations Committee keeping their science grants up high.
Yeah, back in the medieval times when there was the ban on science for because of the whole religion thing, and there was a period of time where not a lot really happened. Maybe we're just going to have a mini one of those, where just kind of the world sort of focuses on reality TV and, other important things like that. And for just a couple of years, I can definitely imagine there being more Apprentice spin-offs now, I'm guessing. Anyway, look.
At least that show's going to end.
This is true.
If it hasn't already, I
have no idea. Okay, well, let's just move on. Space exploration. Now, Donald Trump is a big fan of private enterprise, and he doesn't like the government doing too many things. Therefore, it's not unfeasible to think that he might try and reduce NASA and get more companies like SpaceX getting involved. So that would probably make a lot of sense. And to be fair, because of SpaceX, is it Blue Origin?
Yes, that's space. One of them is Musk.
Yep.
The other is
Bezos.
Paul Allen or somebody, isn't it? From Microsoft.
It's Jeff Bezos, the Amazon guy.
Oh, is it Bezos? Yeah, okay. Yeah, you're right.
Or certainly the public perception of space flight has gone leaps and bounds since SpaceX and Jeff Bezos have come to the frame. However, I guess there's nothing really to measure against. Maybe NASA were doing really great things anyway. Who knows? But look, it seems likely that NASA's going to be stripped back a little bit for these private companies. Okay, just moving on. Intellectual property. Now, again, not a lot has been said about this. However, there's a couple of interesting points that Donald Trump has made. In fact, he talked last year about, and I quote, closing the internet as a way to fight ISIS.
Brilliant.
Yes, because somebody's got an off switch somewhere, I'm guessing.
Yeah. Well, Al Gore did say he invented the internet.
Did he?
So,
okay. Good.
And he won the popular vote, so that just proves. Did not mess with the internet because you're going to get shot down. Well, is there any more tech nonsense from Donald the Trump?
Well, I don't know. There's just a couple of interesting things on patent reform, which is Mike Pence is very close to a group of Republicans who oppose patent reform, so they're clearly in the pockets of some of those patent trolls. And because of Donald Trump and his background, he's very closely tied to the entertainment industry, which is very litigious when it comes to copyright infringement and so forth.
Oh, okay.
So I think it's going to be a bit of a shit few years for intellectual property as well. So I'm moving on to marijuana. Trump,
that's got nothing to do with tech.
No, I know, but I'm sure that a lot of our listener is interested in that. Right, look, okay, whatever. I'm going to move on. Okay, we've spoken about Donald Trump enough.
We've had enough Donald Trump. I'm fed up with it now. I'm feeling there's a bit of sick in my mouth.
Okay, well, let me just bring you up a bit. We're now starting to talk about the PlayStation 4 Pro, the PS4 Pro.
Thank goodness. Breathe a sigh of relief.
There is So some really interesting things happen. So Catherine Byrne, in Expert Reviews, has been writing about the brand new PS4, entitling the article, "Is this the best PS4 yet?" Whatever. So basically, I mean, I'm sure you're asking, you're screaming out, James, what does the Pro bit mean? Well, I'll tell you.
Yes, what does the Pro bit mean, James?
Robin, I'll tell you. Basically, they've got themselves a brand new graphics chip, which allows them to have native 4K resolution from the PS4. Okay, which is really interesting because 4K, of course, is much better than 1K.
Because everyone bought 4K tellies last Christmas.
I don't think I know anybody with a 4K TV.
No. I think it's difficult to avoid them these days, though. They're all
is.
4K.
But if you remember when HD came out 10 years ago now, well, actually a bit more, but let's say 10 years ago, there wasn't much content on them anyway, and the TVs were always the front runners for the... Actually, wasn't that the same with widescreen TVs as well? Widescreen TVs came out before widescreen movies. But anyway... Yes. Point.
No, I think they've had widescreen movies since the 1930s.
No, but VHSs. I remember you used to be able to get
I know
special VHS. Yeah, so calm down, sit down. You know, I'm speaking.
Anamorphic, it was called, where they'd have a compressed image in a 4:3 format, which could be spread out onto 16:9.
Okay, thank you for that. So basically, the PS4 Pro is all about 4K. That's effectively it. But also the better horsepower inside it can mean that you can have more immersive VR experiences, and we all know that PlayStation have been pushing in the VR space. And of course, you can get more stable frame rates from your games. So all in all, a smoother experience. But if you don't have a 4K TV, is it worth upgrading? Well, probably not.
Well, interestingly enough, looking at the specs here, clearly, in order to boost an HD to a 4K, requires 4 times the processing power?
Well, that's crude maths, I would agree. Yeah, sure. Well, why not?
So, I mean, that's quite a significant increase in horsepower, really, isn't it? I mean, are there any 4K games out there?
I would expect there'll be a couple... Here you go. You can see a full list on Sony's website. Let's bring up Sony's website. So on launch day, there's more than 30 titles have been updated. Okay, so the new Hitman game, very good. I'd recommend it to all of our listener. Mafia 3, some interesting things going down there.
Grand Theft Auto 5?
No.
Oh.
No.
Well, there's no games on it, if you ask me. And so how does this affect the PlayStation VR owners? I mean, I did see it, the PlayStation VR, I was in game at the weekend with my son, and we had a look, and people were using it. They were paying £5 for 10 minutes.
What?
Exactly, yeah. So they were paying, were charging people to have a go on it. Wow. But there was a small queue, but a queue of people who seemed absolutely unimpressed by it.
Okay, good.
What does this mean for PlayStation VR owners?
Well, I think it just means that if you've got a PS4 Pro, you're going to get a better experience. So,
in terms of smoother, I mean, you're not going to affect the number of pixels, are you?
No,
because
but as we've discussed in the past, what makes VR really good is the smoothness of the frame rate. But then, of course, to get better frame rate on lower powered hardware, you have worse graphics. So I'm guessing you're probably able to get now 2 smoother, better quality experiences. It's not because, remember, it's not just about pixels, it's all about polygon counts, and polygon count has nothing really to do with pixels. So, so I'm guessing for PS...
Well, Battlefield 1 is on that list, which I've heard good things about.
Yeah.
Infinite Warfare, Call of Duty, I've heard good things about that. The rest of them are of no interest.
It's chicken and egg. They have to start somewhere. I mean,
Rise of the Tomb Raider.
I think from this, look, the reviewer is clearly very positive about the experience of the PS4 Pro, and as they should be, more horsepower equals better game stuff, which is really great. It's completely backwards compatible with the PS4, so the games, from what I've read, you're not going to be able to buy a PS4 Pro only game. So if you've got a PS4 Pro, you're not left out in the cold. But if you haven't got a 4K TV, which, as I said, I don't know anybody that does, and listener, if you do have a 4K TV, please let us know in the comments. Then what's the point? I think they're just playing. This is just the arms race with Microsoft. I mean, that's all it is.
Okay. It looks. I don't know. Is it Techtasm? Oh, crikey.
No, it's not. It's not a Techtasm because it's bound to. This is definitely.
It's an inevitable upgrade.
It's an inevitable ASM.
Yeah, so it's I'll take that every single time. Well, James, let's move on to the next story and ask Technica Ron Amadio. We like his work. Tells us about Android extensions, which could be Google's plan to make Android updates better. Now, Google may have found a way to backport some of the Android open source project features into old versions. Now, stay with me, James. This is going to get technical. The mention in the 85-page compatibility definition document they recently released for version 7 of Android, which just came out, mentions something called Android extensions. Now, I'm going to read this in full. It's not going to make any sense, but bear with me. Android includes the support of extending the managed APIs while keeping the same API level version. Android device implementations must preload the AOSP implementation of both the shared library xshared and shared services xservices with versions higher than or equal to the minimum versions allowed per each API level. For example, Android 7.0 device implementations running API Level 24 must include at least version 1. Now, stay with me. This means that regardless of how indifferent your OEM is to putting updates out to your Android phone, Play services can always be upgraded or updated directly by Google. So today on a production Android device, James, there are two main API sources for developers. The AOSP APIs, which included the base operating system and the proprietary Google APIs that are included in Google Play Services. Now, Play Services is an easily updatable APK, while the AOSP API require a full OS update, which for non-Google phones can be an absolute nightmare of roadblocks.
But they're not saying that that's going to improve, though. I mean, doing a core OS update. Because, I'm looking at the diagram further below of how the OS is split out, and they're definitely adding a lot more. I mean, when I last played with AOSP back in the Android 4.2 days, there's definitely a lot more in Play services now, but the hardware access layer and the Linux kernel and, well, there you go, the application runtime and framework in the core OS, that's where all the vulnerabilities have been.
Okay, so I know the vulnerabilities may have been there, but what we're talking about here is support for. Talk to me a little bit about the vulnerabilities. Which ones? They're all in the AOSP layer, are you saying?
Well, remember the Heartbleed bug? That was down in OpenSSL, which is down there because that would have been in one of the drivers, I'm guessing. The issue that they had when if you open up a certain JPEG, it was able to have a stack overflow or a buffer overflow and go.
That's file browser, is it?
No, that was just in the image viewer. That was in the renderer for the images, which again was that. I think that was maybe even part of the graphics driver. So, it's. Let me just have a look. What was the last Android vulnerability? Because I know we covered it on a.
Well, if we look at some of the things that are in Google Play services, account authentication, app indexing, DHCP client, Google settings, instant apps, maps and places, malware scanner, location APIs, safety net, security DRM APIs, smart lock, system update UI.
It's all the stuff that sits on top of the bit that really does the work. I mean,
yeah,
it's not. I mean, I'm looking here. Vulnerability exposes 900 million Android devices. Okay, so this is a article from Wired. Sorry, the vulnerability was down to a Qualcomm driver. Okay, I mean,
So that would have been in the Linux kernel?
yeah, I mean, so what are they going to do about that?
Nothing. That's in the core OS.
So it's look. Okay, so maybe this clearly isn't about security. This is about the fact that Apple can distribute new APIs to its devices straight away because they control everything, and Google struggles because their manufacturers...
Correct, and they're never going to be as good as that ever unless they completely stop giving Android away free to everybody, which seems highly unlikely because it's all about the app ecosystem. But certainly this is an attempt perhaps to boost up as much as they can into Google Play services and force vendors to allow Google to update Google Play services, which could potentially bring more compatibility and make the problem of fragmentation less of an issue for users. I mean, at the moment, for example, one of the things that they do, I have a Samsung phone, which is on version 6, and the monthly security update from Google comes out almost instantly on my platform, which means that whatever is in that security pack, I get fairly quickly. Now, that's quite a massive leap forward from the way before, which is potentially waiting for 6 months, a year to have a vulnerability patched.
Yeah, true, but that's only if the vulnerability is in the Play services.
Yeah, that's correct. So we've got to, really understand. I mean, the Play services will carry its own list of vulnerabilities. But as you say, yes, it depends what is the percentage of vulnerabilities that cause real problems that are in Core OS, which is what you said, didn't you?
Yes. Look, it's interesting. I mean, this article, of course, leads with a screenshot of the Apple presentation where Apple proudly announces that back in October when they unveiled their latest Mac laptops, that iOS 10 was on 60% of devices, whereas Android 7 is on less than 1% of Android devices.
Yeah, correct. And of course, they're going to play on this the question is, that's not a problem as long as there's not a vulnerability or there isn't any significant security problems. I don't think Google have answered that problem here. So I'm going to call this one a Techtasm. What about you, James?
Yeah, I can't see. What they should do is do what Microsoft did so successfully, which was have a tighter integration with the OEMs. So they kind of force them to update.
Go back to the drawing board, Google. Nice try, but no cigar. Well, James, in our final article, I'm going to move on. The Times columnist, which is a new one on me, Tom Kirshner, reported on November the 7th that Tesla are to end unlimited free use of their supercharging stations. Now, Tesla's said that cars ordered after January 1st, 2017 will get about 1,000 miles worth of supercharger credits each year for use at the supercharger stations. But after the credits are used, owners will have to pay a fee that Tesla didn't reveal. Now, vehicles sold on or before January the 1st would still get unlimited free charging. I guess this is a nice end run into November and December, and I imagine it will boost car sales significantly, won't it? As people obviously think that unlimited miles is a really good thing to have. Now, go on.
No, I'm a bit surprised by this one. Because that was always one of the big deals of buying a Tesla, right? That you kind of got free charging.
Well, it was. And the question is, all right, so while Tesla wouldn't say how much these fees would be, it says that it would be less than the cost of filling with gasoline. So, and petrol in America is not taxed very heavily, so it's much cheaper than Europe. And the average price of US electricity is 12.9 cents per kilowatt hour, so it would only cost $10 to fully charge a Tesla Model S with a 275-mile range at home. And as an electric car owner, James, I can tell you, you do all of your charging at home. It's very, very rare that you go out and actually use these things.
Which, of course, though, that will change when electric cars start having range that actually makes sense.
Well, no, it'll change when, first of all, it won't change in terms of behaviours. 95% of your journeys are just your commute and going to see your mates and going down to Tesco's. The number of trips that you actually
supermarkets
take.
are available.
Yeah, of course. The number of trips that you actually take which require you to exceed the range of your electric car are few and far between. And get this, when you wake up in the morning, your car's always full. I have a full tank every morning when I get up because the car has charged itself overnight. Now, I don't have to worry about whether my tank's low and whether I need to go to a petrol station at all. So, day to day, I don't even think about charging. Whenever the car comes home, I put it on the drive, I stick the charger in. I think the issue is not so much the cost of charging and whether this supercharger network is free, because Tesla owners, like normal people, don't do these miles unless you're a taxi driver or something, or a delivery man or woman, in which case you're not going to be driving a Tesla anyway. I think this whole issue, I think this is a non-story.
Yeah, I suppose so. I knew that when they announced the Model 3 that they would say that the superchargers would not be free, and therefore another reason to pay a bit more and get the Model S. But so it's now no longer the case. So
I guess this, I've often thought that the unique thing about Tesla is not the car, it's the supercharger network, because what that did at a stroke is it removed the range anxiety, which prevents people who've got gasoline cars from buying an electric car. So that's how he tempted people in with the supercharger network. That was the master stroke, the thing that the other electric car vendors failed to address. Now he's saying that's achieved its goal, which is to get a large proportion. I think it is the most popular luxury sedan in North America. Pound for pound, it's competing with Mercedes and BMW. So it is he's achieved his goal, and therefore he doesn't need it anymore. And he's saying, right, it becomes a fee-paying part of Tesla like everything else. It's got to pay its way.
Yeah, okay. I understand that. That makes sense. Can you charge a Tesla at one of those ecotricity places?
Yes, there is a little converter doohickey.
Okay.
Where you can plug in it's called a Chardimo, which is this kind of DC fast charging for every other car except a Tesla, and it converts it to the Tesla standard.
Okay, can you charge your Hippo with a Tesla supercharger thing?
No, you can't charge any car other than a Tesla in the supercharger.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Okay, well, look, it makes sense. It's just a bit of a surprise because I think back to when they did the Model 3, but hey, what can I say?
Well, yeah, they've obviously run the numbers and realised that at $35,000 they can't make money on a Model 3 if they throw in free unlimited driving. Of course, I think the problem is more acute in the United States where they've got more you go further, don't you? I mean, there's just more to travel. There's longer distances to travel. And
true. But what you can do east to west coast completely electric, though.
Yes, yeah, you can. Yeah, if everything's working.
Which is that's quite impressive because that's a free, apart from your time, for however long it takes. Like, is it like a week or something it takes to drive that or something? But
it'll take a while, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, great. It makes sense.
It does, and that means that we've come to the end of our story. That is all for this week. You can find us at facebook.com/Techtasm. Subscribe on your podcatcher and contact us at feedback@techtasm.com. Now we record at about 9 o'clock once a week. So watch out for next week's episode. This is me, Sir Robin Yellow.
Me, Mr. James Woodall.
Asking the question on your behalf. Is it real or is it just a Techtasm?